Hello everybody, Steve the Historian coming to you from Lone Fir Cemetery. I'd say my favorite cemetery in Portland. I love other ones. I've been to Riverview a few times, but in terms of just, I guess all the ways that you could look at a cemetery, this is my favorite. And a couple years ago, I did a video visiting a few grave sites around here, talking a little bit about who is buried there, and I'm going to do that again today. I have a larger list, and it's a much larger collection, or it's a more diverse collection of people. The previous time I came through here, it was predominantly just dark stories that I was covering, but this is going to cover all assortment of different things. And I'm starting over, this is the west side of the cemetery. It ends right over here, and I'm just going to be slowly making my way to the east, kind of zigzagging my way there. That is the route I'm going to take. I'm walking through section 10, and section 11 is, I'm walking through section 11, and section 10 is directly in front of me, and that's where I'm going to get started. Actually, with a grave site that don't know exactly where it's at. So here's where they separate. Section 11 over here, section 10 right through here. And section 10 was a particular area where a lot of people that were institutionalized, primarily at the asylum that Dr. Hawthorne ran. Dr. Hawthorne's actually buried here as well. A lot of people that were institutionalized there got buried in section 10. And a lot of them were buried in unmarked graves. And I learned that by uncovering the story of someone named Mary Holmes. It said Polly in quotes, so I don't know if that was a nickname, or the name could have had some other connotation to it. And mind you, I looked on findagrave.com, there's like 21,000 memorials, which means, about 21,000 people buried here, something along those lines. And in section 10 somewhere, it is believed, it's actually not confirmed, and I'm sure this was probably a common thing with people that were institutionalized. I know there's a lengthy history with the Morningside Sanatorium, and a lot of the people that died there, it was unknown where they were buried. And there's been efforts to try to find where a lot of them ended up. But Mary Holmes was born in 1810 in Virginia. She was born into slavery. And the family moved out here in 1844. So she was actually probably one of the only black people in the state, one of a limited few. I'm guessing as a slave, it was probably allowed. And she was freed by her owner in 1850. And I couldn't really find a lot of information, but it said that she was living in Corvallis and she was removed from her home and institutionalized at Hawthorne's Asylum in 1867. And she died either at the end of 1871 or the start of 1872. So it's old information. It's very vague. And it's believed she was buried here because of the types of people that were buried here. But it's only believed. It's not known for absolute certain. And if she obviously was buried in this section. Well, actually, I'm just starting to cross over into the next one. She was buried in this section somewhere. Her grave is unmarked if she is here. We're now entering section or block 6. There's actually 2 people buried in this vicinity. All right, I found you. It wasn't easy because it's buried under a lot of stuff. sorry, I'm cycling papers. I dug around and I was looking for someone named Higgins. I saw Frank D. Higgins. I'm looking for William L. Higgins. So, we got WM, which was a common way to say William L. And then you got the Higgins. Give the guy his name back. But yeah, Higgins. Ugh, I'm already getting dirty out here. So William Higgins, when he passed away in 1908, he was the oldest living citizen in Portland. He was 85 or 86. You know, you go back far enough, a lot of people, they don't know exactly what year or month they were born. But William Higgins came to Portland for the first time. He didn't become a resident until 1850, but the first time he came here was in 1843 when Portland was just barely anything. And he actually first came here in 1843 traveling on the same boat. He was part of the crew that Captain John H. Couch traveled with when he came to Portland for the first time. So he ties back to very early Portland history. Right by where I walked past this, and it sucks because the top's broken off. But we got Erasmus Shattuck, Henry Shattuck, people from the Shattuck family, which I'm wondering if that's tied to, I forget the name of the Shattuck who started the elementary school in Portland that's now part of was it Henry Shattuck? If it is, that's his grave right here. Henry Shattuck, who was part of the school district, and yeah, Shattuck School was named after him. Well, I sure hope this is not the grave I'm looking for. I wouldn't know if I missed it. Aha, found it. Yeah, I brought my GoPro with me because I have so many names I'm looking up that my phone may literally die before I get there. But here's the next grave I was looking for, also in Section 6. I figured it'd be a pretty decent sized one. This guy was prominent enough. This is the grave, looks like it's been fixed a few times, of George Law Curry. Born, looks like 1820, died 1878. Like many early Portlanders, he was born out east, born in Pennsylvania. And like at least one or two other people that I'm going to visit, he came to Oregon on the Oregon Trail, arriving during the 1840s. Now, Joseph Lane was technically the first governor of Oregon, although it wasn't a state yet. He was the first governor of the territory. And because it was the territory and not a state, the governors were appointed by whoever was president. So an issue came up in 1854. Joseph Lane left to fill a congressional spot, and the president at the time, Franklin Pierce, appointed Curry as the governor of the Oregon Territory. And he remained the governor until 1859. He actually, a new governor was chosen at the time that Oregon became a state, but when Oregon officially became a state, Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1859, George Curry was still the governor. So, pretty significant figure. Also, Curry County in Oregon, named after this guy. This is Section 1 I'm now stepping into, which probably some of the most prominent people buried here. Well, there's a lot of people from the Stevens family since they were directly involved in finding it. And I actually got a reference. James B. Stevens, born Virginia, November 1806, died 1889. Here we lie by consent after 57 years, 2 months, and 2 days, sojourning through life, awaiting nature's immutable laws to return us back to the elements of the universe of which we were first composed. Yeah, so James Stevens, he was the founder of, he pretty much made East Portland a thing. And as I do, every time I visit here, I have to, I always poke fun about how, like, horrifying this artwork is. Beautifully crafted, but horrifying. I mean, he seems like a nice fella, but she just looks like she has skeletons in her closet. And I mean, like, real, actual human bones in her closet, which is not nice. She probably was an okay lady. She's probably more productive, probably more heartfelt than even I am, so I don't know who I am to judge. It also looks like somebody put a candle here. I don't know if this was supposed to be up there or down here, so I'll at least have it like that. And you can see there is some jewelry up here, but yeah, lots of members of the Stevens family located here. While not officially established as a cemetery until 1855, the first burial here happened back in 1846 with the burial of Emmer Stevens, the father of James B. Stevens, shortly after their arrival in what would become the Portland area. James Stevens would take out a land claim in what is today Southeast Portland, and he would establish the town of East Portland later, which would be annexed into Portland in 1891. Originally called the Mount Crawford Cemetery, it would be renamed Lone Fir in 1866 when the land was sold, named after the one solitary fir tree located in the cemetery at the time, a tree that's still there to this day. At 30 acres, this cemetery has more than 25,000 people buried there. I'm looking for a particular character. Oh, and here's, while we're in the area, Daniel Lounsdale, who I've spoken of many times in my videos. Not always complimentary, but that's history for you. Yeah, born 1803? And died 1862 in memory of D.H. Or maybe it says in memory of Daniel Lounsdale. So maybe he's not actually buried here? I'll have to look at that, make certain. Got some Del Schneider. What if that's in relation to the building? Anywho, as I meander, I figured as much with a grave this astronomically huge. This is the site. It's interesting. It says it's singular. Finis Carruthers. I thought his last name was Carruthers. Am I going to have to look that up too? Have I been led astray? Obviously regarded as a pioneer in these parts, and he established Carruthers Addition, which is located just south of downtown Portland today. And I saw this in the distance, and I was like, I bet you $1 million this is his, because of how massive it is. So section 1 ends here where the sidewalk comes in and wraps around. And as it does, this little area here becomes section B. Well, I guess at that marker, it officially becomes section B. Now, I don't know, because I have a feeling there's some either buried or unmarked graves here, because I know in this area I tried finding the grave of Thomas Kennelly, who was found dead in the ruins of the, it was called the Villard Hotel at the time, because they had to abandon construction for a while, but that ultimately became the Portland Hotel. 1886, I want to say. He was found dead in the basement, and he's said to be buried here in this particular, it may be a little bit further down there, but I could not for the life of me find his grave. And this is one where even the find a grave information was not very detailed. Pretty much all they knew was that this person was buried here, and unfortunately this is somebody who I could totally see getting buried in an unmarked grave. and people not really, unfortunately, not caring enough. So somewhere in Section B, obviously I'll pause if I find it, there are that is a big grave. There are the remains of a woman named Madge Wilson, who was killed in a rundown rooming house in 1906 at 3rd and Burnside. Kind of place people with not a whole lot going on in their lives go to. And she'd gotten kind of mixed up in a lot of things. And she ended up in this rundown rooming house with this guy named Henry Hose, who was in the city. He was in the military, been in the town for a while, and like a lot of people that stopped off in Portland, he just kind of was just traveling around, having some fun, drinking, doing whatever. And it's very strange, but it seems like they were having an altercation. There's claims that he just kind of lost his mind and started like hearing music and this. But anyway, Henry Hose just brutally murdered Madge Wilson in this rundown rooming house. I think it was like the Winchester House is what it was called. And here we're coming to the end of block or Section B, and you can see there's a lot of space where there's no gravestones. So it's very possible she's buried in this area. But yeah, and I reference her briefly in my brothel history video because Van Gogh, because she was also working as a sex worker. And I think that was probably one of the things that pissed Henry Hose off, was that I think he, wanted her to just be with him, and she had a job she was going to do. So since there's a decent amount of graves here, my guess is she's buried somewhere between where these graves end and the end of the Section B. So probably in here somewhere would be my best guess. Bonus. I wasn't even looking for this. I was looking for someone else who I feel like should be in this area. I stumbled onto the grave of Thomas J. Dreyer, which is convenient because I also want to visit the gravesite of the individual who co-founded the Oregonian with Thomas J. Dreyer. Born 1808, died 1879. Editor of the first weekly Oregonian, published December 4th, 1850. You even got this little outline. I wonder if that's actually what their building they worked out of looked like. I mean, it looks like a very standard building for 1850 Portland. So I wasn't planning on that. So I'm wandering around like, this guy was important enough. Why can't I find his grave amidst all of these? And literally, it was so obvious. It was right in front of me. I think I was getting stuck looking at the ground. I look down and I see TJH. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm looking for the grave of Thomas J. Holmes. And then I look up Thomas J. Holmes Jr. So this was the sub, but yeah, TJ, it just says TJH Sr. So that would be his father, and that's actually the individual in question. Or maybe all of their name, like maybe on one side. Yeah, here we go. This is one of the ways I absolutely know it's him, is that died June 18th, 1867. So Thomas J. Holmes, he was born in England, came to Oregon, and in 1866, the year before this, I actually want to do a more detailed video about this time, kind of in Portland government. Henry Failing was the mayor, and he resigned late in 1866, and the city council unanimously decided to have Thomas J. Holmes become mayor. And June 17th, 1867, he was reelected. And then the following day, he died of a stroke. So they had to, rush to try to find a replacement. And eventually, Joseph A. Chapman would become mayor, and he served 3 non-consecutive terms as Portland's mayor, and he actually is also buried here. I also noticed there's a lot of Strobridges here, which I don't know much about them. I mostly just know of Strobridge Block in downtown Portland. It's in the Yam Hill Historical District. But yeah, here's the very obvious, even though I couldn't seem to find it, gravestone for Thomas J. Holmes Sr. and also other members of his family. So I just got done saying he was replaced by Joseph A. Chapman, who's also buried here. So eventually, at some point, I'll see Joseph Chapman's grave. Well, there's Holmes's grave right there, and Joseph A. Chapman buried right there. Kind of a modest grave, you know, for a guy that was so prominent to the city and was the mayor 3 times. Joseph Addison Chapman, born 1821, died 1885. He actually had just finished his 3rd term as mayor when he passed away. There's a lot of odd circumstances in terms of something else I want to look more into, but apparently in 1885 he was seriously injured when the carriage he was riding crashed into some low-hanging telephone wire, and then he suffered a stroke shortly after and died. But yeah, I mean, he was a physician in town. He came to Portland in the 1840s, so he is a pioneer among the early Portland settlers. And he actually worked for the Hawthorne Asylum. I was trying to find the word. What's that word? Which is interesting, because I was just the first person I visited way over there, again, assuming she's here, was Mary Holmes, who was at that very asylum. And again, Dr. Hawthorne is around here somewhere. Still in section 6, but I am looking for Davis. What's that? Is that? Yes, Anthony L. Davis. That is him. Born 1794. Yep, that's when he was born. So yes, there's Thomas G. There's lots of Davises. So yeah, Anthony. So this is where I guess multiple members of the Davis family are buried. This is Thomas A. Davis. So this a son. But yes, Anthony Litzy, if I'm pronouncing that right, Davis. Pretty significant figure in early Portland. He is another guy that came here on the Oregon Trail, and he was involved not only in organizing Portland's first public school, which that was kind of a place of contention for people, but a lot of the prominent people in town really wanted a public school for the kids. They just even though they were the affluent people, they wanted education more readily available to people. What was the point of a mind not being used, I guess? He was also the first Justice of the Peace for Portland. Got that position in 1854. And he even later became a circuit court judge. So he was, Mr. Davis here was a pretty significant figure. So as I started walking this way, knowing he was also in Section 6, I figured, he might be that one, but he's probably this one. Seems like he was important enough. Switched over to the GoPro because, as I expected, this is going to take a little longer than planned. There are a lot of people. I've actually stumbled onto a few in the past. There are people out here that just have the names of, their names are the same as other famous people. Sometimes not real famous people. I don't know where it's at, but I found that there is somebody buried in this cemetery who's just named Snow White. Where are you? I feel like it's right in this area. It could be an unmarked grave. It probably is. which kind of defeats. I wanted to walk up to it and be like, ah, look at this name. But yeah, it would be like right here. Anyway, somewhere in this vicinity, I'm not finding the grave for it, there is someone buried who was just named Woodrow Wilson. Sometimes, well, it's like sometimes graves are covered, and sometimes they're just bare, or like sometimes there's just no grave marker, so you can't really tell, but sometimes it's just, there's, what am I saying? Sometimes there's no grave marker, so you don't know exactly where they are, but sometimes there's a grave marker that's just buried, so you can't see it, but it still could be like right there at your feet. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm getting distracted, I think, because I'm still trying to find Woodrow Wilson. It's not going to happen today. So I'm about to enter Section 9. I am looking for a particular grave. Fairly far to this end. It would be in here. Zitzmeyer. I am in Section 9, right? I haven't lost my mind. No. I would have walked right past it. Here is it's such a modest grave for such a guy who, in my opinion, he's my favorite Portland mayor from all the history that I've found so far. Harry Lane is my favorite Portland mayor. Very ahead of his time in certain aspects. Not perfect by any means, but, you know, back when he was the mayor of Portland from 1905 to 1909. And when we had the zoo established in Washington Park, he was fighting tooth and nail to get rid of it because he said it was cruel to animals, which that wasn't really, you know, a lot of people weren't thinking that back then. One of my other favorite things about Harry Lane, I mean, there's a lot, but these are the ones that immediately come to mind, is he, when Erickson's Saloon, one of the most prominent saloons historically in Portland, August, who ran the place, he offered free lunches because there was, you know, it was an area where there was a lot of transient workers, a lot of people that were going to go to bed without food, and he would give them these free meals. And the local police started taking advantage of this program because they could, you know, August Erickson, he was, you know, he had a popular place, but he was engaged in some criminal activity, just like pretty much every other saloon owner in the North End. And so they would come in and be like, oh, well, give us a free meal. And when Harry Lane found out about it, he ripped into the police force. And he was like, no man who's willing, or no, I'm paraphrasing, but like no officer who's willing to take advantage of a program like that, considering who those meals were supposed to go to, has any right arresting a man on vagrancy. He was not afraid to say what he felt, even if it was unpopular. God, I love Harry Lane. Rest in peace. It would be kind of a newer grave. I don't know. Yeah. I knew this one was to clean this one off just a little bit. This is the burial site of Joshua Michael Jeffries, who you'll see he was only 11 years old when he died, and he was the victim of an unsolved killing. He was shot 2001 and never solved. You can go and look up Portland's cold case files, and you'll see that this is one that was never solved. Which, it's, you know, an unsolved murder is always horrible, but when it happens to an 11-year-old kid, it you know, it hits you different. And I didn't know if I was gonna, but I knew his grave, just based on the numbers, was really close to Harry Lane's grave, so I knew they were pretty close to in line with each other. But rest in peace, Joshua, because what happened to him was just, I mean, again, getting killed getting shot. It's never like, oh well, you know, in this case it's not that big of it. It's always terrible, but just terrible thing to happen. No kid should ever have to experience anything like that. And I am going to continue my roundabout in a moment, but I mean, anybody who comes to Lone Fir, you gotta take a moment and stop and pay a visit to the mausoleum here, which for years I was I mean, you know, when I didn't really know Portland history all that well yet, because I think even more of the name is missing now, and I would try to guess what the name was on there, which is Maclay, as in Maclay Park. And probably can't see it with my GoPro, but yeah, you can see there's a bunch of spaces where bodies have been placed in there. And it says, I noticed this in the past, it says there's the word Kerr on the gate here, which I'm wondering if that's in relation to God, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a the Kerr who's like God, I can't remember his name. I can't even remember Maclay's first name. I'm having just a total, my brain is just shutting down. I'll put a title in here because my memory, for some reason, I want to say Joseph Maclay, and I know that's wrong. But was it Peter Kerr? I'm wondering if maybe that's a Peter Kerr reference right there. I mean, they could have known each other. Kerr was kind of a park fan himself, and obviously Maclay was as well. Here's where section 9 over here becomes section 12, and then I want to get over to section 13 and see a spot right down there. But before I leave section 9 permanently, I just want to reference, this was just something I stumbled onto. Now, there was not a specific site given, so I wouldn't know where to even look, but all I know is that it's in section 9, and they said to the west side, so it would be somewhere over there. It wouldn't surprise me if it's an unmarked grave, and if it is a marked grave, then there wouldn't be a name on it, because even on findagrave.com, it's listed as unknown. There's a lot of unknown people buried here. Sometimes people where we know like their first name, but we still don't really know who they are. So it's inferred that this individual is buried between here and the crossing street over there. And it's not known for certain, but it's believed that that person, this unknown individual that was buried over here, was probably the victim of an unsolved murder, because this individual was found on November 16th, 1902, floating in the Willamette River near where Davis Street started. And some guys out on the river pulled him ashore, and they could see that his neck was broken and it looked like he had been hung. So it's unknown whether he did that to himself or whether someone had done it to him. So it was suggested that it may have been a murder. It may have been done by this individual himself, but he is reportedly buried somewhere off towards that end of this section. And with that said, Bills James. So now we're venturing into section 18. And there's actually a couple people I want to see in this section. One person I'm particularly interested in, just because he's I mean, he was a real hero. And it's just wild that this ended up being his final resting place. Oh, I think I found it. I knew it was in this area. Let's see. Harriet Reginald. Yep. Captain Warner Eckhart. Nope, I was just making sure there weren't more people. David Bowles. But yeah, because he was born in 1897. This is April 29th, 1897. That's a bummer. He died the day before would have been his 93rd birthday. And it says Reginald Bowles. His full name was Charles Reginald Elias Bowles. And this guy was frickin' amazing. First off, at the age of 11 in 1908, he saved 2 friends from drowning. So you're already getting kind of a little foreshadowing. He was a very good swimmer. And 1914, he stormed into a burning building and saved a baby. And then, to top it off, 1915, so he was only 18 years old. This was July 24th, 1915. A massive ship called the Eastland ends up capsizing. There's over 2,000 people on it. Hundreds of people end up getting killed. Some of, I want to call him Charles because that's his real name, but it says Reginald, so I'll respect that. Reginald, some of his friends see this happening, and they run and go tell him. And he's like, well, okay. He throws on his swimming shorts. He runs to the scene, and while even divers are on the scene, and they're like, I'm not going down to this part of the boat. I'm not going down this way. I'm gonna die down there. Reginald, he just dove in and started, and they said he went to places that divers pre-prepared were not willing to go to. And pretty much every time he came up, he had a person with him. All in all, he saved 37 people. I've heard some reports say 40. Maybe they were rounding up. And he got to a place where he was almost incoherent with exhaustion. And people had to stop him from going back in to try to save more people. He was just dazed, and he was just like, give me a second to catch my breath and I'll go back in. And they forced him to stop. But he dove in. Literally, one of these dives probably should have killed him. And he brought 37 freaking people to the surface. So when I say the guy was a hero, I'm not just using that word lightly. This guy saved so many people by the time he was a young adult. He was barely able to vote by the time he was diving down and saving all these people. So this was a gravesite I was really excited to find. And, this guy wasn't born here. And the Eastland disaster, as the incident was known, happened in Chicago. But somewhere along the way, he ended up in Portland, and he's buried in Section 18 at Lone Fir Cemetery, just south of the Maclay Mausoleum. And it's interesting because there's another really famous person who's located close by, right here, who has a greater Portland history. But after that story, I'm not really as excited to see. And actually, I just noticed we've got some Bickles here, which actually makes a lot of sense, because I forget which member of the Bickle family. One of them was in business with Frank Deacom, and that's who I'm visiting now. Frank Deacom, who is buried right here. And Frank Deacom, very prominent businessman in Portland. He got into the game in the fruit and confection business. And it looks like there's multiple members of the family here. Frank is marked as being right here. And yeah, he got involved in a lot of other things. And he had the Deacom and Reed block built, which at the time it was like the largest commercial building in Portland. And perhaps he's best known for the Deacom building in downtown Portland. It's one of the most attractive, photogenic buildings in the downtown area. And that's all Frank Deacom. So we are making our way north. Oh, and I think I already found what I'm looking for. At least I see the name. So this is Section 22. It starts right here. And I knew the individual I was looking for was over here. And his last name is Thayer. And I see a big thing that says Thayer Dowd over here. So I gotta be looking for the grave of William Wallace Thayer, which I was having a hard time finding information for, because I originally wrote his name down as William Wallace Taylor, because that just be happening. Okay, wait, yep, here he is, W.W. Thayer, born 1827, that's what my info says. And then you see Dowds over here, so I'm wondering, maybe they were married. I actually don't know off the top of my head, so that's probably why you have Thayer Dowd right here. But in our case, we have W.W. Thayer, born 1827. He was actually born in New York, came to Oregon. Is another instance where we have a former Oregon governor who's got one of these. I mean, they're charming, but he's got one of these tiny kind of, it's like a log for a grave, kind of like Mr. Chapman's grave up over there-ish. There, somewhere over there. Yeah. So Mr. Thayer, right here, he was Oregon's 6th governor from 1872 to 1882. He then went on to become a justice of the Oregon Supreme Court, and in the late 1880s became the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court. And it's known that he won probably the closest Oregon governor race in history. He won the election in 1878 by 59 votes. So, it's a close call. And from Mr. Thayer's grave, we don't need to venture too far in this direction. I'm looking for the grave of Dr. Collister Martin Wheeler. Where you at, Mr. Wheeler? He should be. I see a Wheeler. Alma, Edward, and Fanny. Okay, I'm finding other Wheelers. I need to find the right Wheeler. Where's the right Wheeler? John Collister. Okay, wait. Thomas Chester Wheeler. Where? Hold on. Okay, Collister Martin Wheeler. Okay, so he's part of this right here. Okay, here we go. Clean you off a little bit. I forgot, because I was like, I'm looking at all these old graves, and I'm like, this one doesn't look that old. And then I forget that Dr. Wheeler here, he didn't die that long ago. Part of the reason for that is that this man, who was a lifelong Portland resident, as I understand it, was 104 years old when he died. He was born in 1893 and died in I almost said 1897, because that made more sense. So just for reference, this guy was born about a year before the Great Portland Flood of 1894 happened, and he died when I was 11. That is too much to handle. Part of the reason why this guy probably lived so long was he took really good care of himself. He was a dentist for decades. And when he retired from dentistry at 75, and he had a solid 29 years left in his life, he started getting into a lot of, he started doing like weightlifting and getting into competitions and just doing a lot of athletics. And he did this literally through his 90s. He was still engaging in competitions, and because he lived as long as he did, he served in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. Absolutely nuts. And I want to say in the information I read, because he had a previous wife who passed away many years earlier. And this wife, because it says that she died 2006, it said that he was like 80 when they got married. So they were kind of one of those, he knew he was going to live a long time. He was like, I'm only 80, let's get married again. I love it when people, that late in life, when a lot of people are thinking about packing it in, people still find love. It's keeps you young. I would guess. I'm only about halfway to 80, so I wouldn't know for certain. So Block 8M starts here. So it looks like it takes up everything up to the sidewalk up here. So I'm looking for north. I'm guessing this huge one right here is it. In fact, I'm not even going to wait. Because it's about right where the next person I'm looking for will be. Someone who I've already referenced a couple of times in this video. I'm going to guess that this is the gravestone for Dr. Hawthorne. Haha! James C. Hawthorne. Let's see, 20 years, I'm guessing that's superintendent and physician of the Oregon Hospital for the Insane. Born at Mercer, Pennsylvania in 1819 and turned into rest February 15th, 1881. So he got a big one. And he was a key early physician in Portland's history, and he, as you would assume, took a very serious, or he took mental health very serious at a time where a lot of other people weren't. He did run the Hawthorne Asylum, and as respected as this guy is, I mean, especially going back into the 1800s and so forth, there was probably some not great things going on at his asylum, but Dr. James Hawthorne, who it looks like this is where he's actually buried, because it says J.C. Hawthorne with his date of birth and date of death. That's the one nice thing about looking up prominent people, is they usually have pretty massive graves, which is interesting. I always make sure to visit this grave when I'm here, and it's right over here, and it's a little bit more subdued than some of the others. And that is, I actually cleaned his grave off a couple years ago when I came out here and visited, because you could barely see it. And it's like, oh, no big deal. It's just Asa Lovejoy's grave, one of the founders of Portland. Asa Lovejoy looks like he came over on the Oregon Trail 1843. I maybe missed that last time. And he's the guy that lost the coin flip, the famous coin flip that named this city. Why is it every time I come here, his frickin' grave is always... there we go. It's, it works for now. People can see it. But yeah, so here's his burial spot. And he was the guy that wanted to name Portland Boston and lost out to Francis Pettygrove. I'm just dropping stuff everywhere. Lost out to Francis Pettygrove, who wanted to name it Portland after Portland, Maine, where he was from, and the rest is history. And because of that, we know for a fact that Asa Lovejoy was from Boston. Anyway, onward we go. So, from section 8M, where Mr. Hawthorne and Mr. Lovejoy are interned, I'm now in section 7M. I'm guessing this grave over here, I don't know, this grave, unless it's been replaced, it looks too new. Anyway, I'm looking for the grave of another prominent early Portlander, William Williams Chapman. Donated a lot of land. He was one of the earlier landowners in Portland, and this is not his. Okay, well, sometimes you get him wrong. You can't win them all. He should be in this area, though. But he donated the land that became some of the land that became part of the South Park blocks, and he also donated land on the Plaza blocks, and that's part of the reason why one of the blocks is called, why am I losing track? Chapman Square. It's named after him. Aha! Is this the one? No, William Collins. What am I saw William C, and I'm like, William C, William Chapman, yes! Jeez, my brain just shut off. Well, he should be around here. This is just a really old grave, so I'm just like, that looks like it says something Clara. Ah, I would have walked right past him. Is this his actual one? No, this says something else. Effie Chapman. This is obviously, I mean, I don't think this is this is probably a stone that's been replaced. This looks a little too contemporary. Maybe I'm wrong, you know, I'm not a cemetery genius, but this looks a little too new and contemporary for a guy who died in 1892. And yeah, Williams Chapman is he's an interesting figure. So in addition to being a prominent early Portlander, another guy that came here on the Oregon Trail, he's the other co-founder of the Oregonian that he found with God, what's his? I already forgot your name. I know his grave's right there. I feel like a jackass. They're buried close together, which I guess is nice. Thank God. Dreyer. Thomas Dreyer. I can see it. He's there. Williams, God. Anyway, these two men co-founded the Oregonian, and here they are buried, only, what? I don't even know if it's 100 feet apart. He was also a big part of pushing the Great Plank Road, which I did a video on not too long ago. And became involved in railroad, really helping the railroad develop in Portland in later years. And what I found interesting in terms of looking this guy up, and it's a little bit, it kind of raises my my hackles a bit, including the fact that he was fighting in Indian wars, is that Williams Chapman apparently hated Abraham Lincoln. And he hated him so much that he was holding a federal position at the time, and he just left. He quit that position because he was having to deal with Lincoln being president at that time. And I'm just like, I don't know. You're giving some pro-slavery vibes with that one. I don't know. Maybe he just didn't like Lincoln. Maybe he didn't like his personality. Still in the same section, still in 7M, looking for this grave? Is this the one? It's pretty, yep, this is the one. It's been very damaged with time. So it's a little hard to read, but Ralph H. Wilcox. Dr. Wilcox to you. And this guy, I recognized his name when I looked him up, and because I can't tell exactly when he was born. Is that 1818? But he is regarded as Ralph Wilcox. He's regarded as the first practicing doctor in Portland. He was also he's been said to be the city's first teacher. And I did a video about old, the early history of Portland schools, and I remember referencing him, and I don't remember whether I referenced him as the first teacher of the first school. I'm pretty sure I did, because the first school was in 1847, and it said that is when he became a teacher in Portland, because he'd been here. Another guy who came on the Oregon Trail and arrived in the city in 1845 when Portland wasn't even an actual city yet. And so he is also buried here, just a stone's throw from where Williams Chapman is. And then you just got this. I wonder if this is in relation to him specifically or just his family. Back to my iPhone because I finally ran out of space on my GoPro. So I am the next section over. I was just in, Tibbetts. That's actually a fairly famous name in town too. This is section 10M. And you've got members of the Tryon family located here. And you see a reference to Socrates Tryon. His full name was Socrates Hotchkiss Tryon Sr. So it looks like this is where he's buried, I'm assuming with his wife. And I just want to stop here real quick because Socrates Tryon, if you're a local, you might recognize the name. He's the guy that had the land that ultimately became Tryon Creek State Park, one of my most favorite parks to visit in the city. So you know where that came from now. And with that, we begin heading south. It's not supposed to rain today, but I don't like these clouds that have shown up. It's so beautiful here. I mean, you can understand why this is my favorite cemetery in Portland. And I'm heading towards section 28, which the one I'm about to enter across the path here. Section 27, so 28 is the next one, and I want to be right kind of smack dab in the middle of it. So there's where 27 starts and it ends over there, so I kind of want to be going through here. Now this next one, this is a gravesite I tried to find on a previous video and couldn't find it. Now there's fairly small graves, but there's multiple people from the family related buried here, so I think at least one of them is visible. And I'm wondering seriously if the last time I was here, one of those, or at least the main grave I was looking for, was covered up. Because in particular, I'm looking up the grave of a woman named Maud McCroskey Belding, and they should be, I mean, right in here. They should be. Wait, Maxine McCloskey. We have a McCloskey. No, not I'm looking for McCroskey. Oh, I thought I had it. Yeah, it should be right in this general vicinity. And unless it's just mismarked, which is entirely possible, but this is the second time I've looked it up and it's led me here. Anyway, Daisy, I saw an M, Daisy Miller. Oh, interesting. Anyway, somewhere in this area, there are a couple people from the McCroskey family buried, and yet I still can't find their graves. Maud, in this case, was married, and this actually ties into something else. Another grave here started to drift in a I thought I found, this is McCleary. Why are you giving me all of these comparable names? Anyway, Maud McCroskey, who again, I'm thinking they were buried right over here, and there's just spaces where you can't see any graves, and I think their graves may just be underground. But yeah, Maud was married to a guy named Lester Belding, who was one of the great scumbags of early 1900s Portland. He was a loser and she left him, make a long story short, and he couldn't handle it. She left him and then went to live with her parents in a house that would now be kind of on the Chinatown Pearl border. And he showed up with a gun and, you know, lost his mind. He opened fire and shot his wife dead. And even their little son, who ran because there was gunfire, Lester Belding, like, went to the door and then shot his son as he was running away. His son survived. And in classic early 1900s tough kid from Portland, he was like asked about it by like the police and newspaper reporters, and he gave this very matter-of-fact account. He was just like, my dad came in and started shooting, so I got scared and I ran, and when I was running away, my dad shot me. Horrible, horrible story. And I haven't looked at that story in a while, but I'm pretty certain he killed, I want to say he killed Maud and both of her parents. They lived in a small house, and he just ambushed them. But yeah, this is one I just can't seem to figure out. But right over there, that's right about where they would be, and there's just lots of spaces where there's no graves visible. So that's my guess. Okay, we are now venturing towards section 39, which is at the southeast corner of the cemetery. You can see we're along the south end. This is actually where the one of the old streetcars ran down Morrison here, and you can see there's actually pictures taken from in the cemetery. Actually, they would have been taken from section 39 that I'm going to. Pictures taken where you can see the streetcars going down Morrison here. Contemplated using that picture for a Portland Then and Now video if I was to do one that was kind of more Buckman neighborhood centered. But I think, yeah, we're about to enter section 39. Got another tragedy here for you, but this was somebody who until recently, I had no idea, was buried here. And he's buried somewhere right over here. And this is a guy named Edmund Tobin, who I've dedicated a whole video to, at least in terms of some of the actions that this guy chose to engage in the year 1904. I went back and they actually took a picture. And so, yeah, it appears he doesn't have a marked grave because pictures taken of his gravesite say that it's right next to this grave of Frank W. McMahon. And it's like so many people in this area died in 1904. So I'm like, I know I'm in the right area. So based on what they're suggesting in terms of like section, lot, and grave spot, Edmund Tobin is right here. And I mean, he didn't really deserve a gravestone anyway. So I mean, maybe there's one buried under there somewhere, but I mean, this is one gravestone I'm not really too invested in anybody ever cleaning up. Edmund Tobin, again, I covered in a video I did. He was an older gentleman who lived out in Eastern Oregon. He manipulated this young woman into marrying him, claiming he had all this money and she'd live happily ever after. And she married him, perhaps foolishly, and went back to Eastern Oregon with him and found herself pretty much just, doing chores for this deadbeat. So she bailed, left, came to Portland. He kept trying to get her back. He couldn't get her to, because why would she? And his last gasp effort happened in 1904. She was living in the Ainsworth block in downtown at 3rd and Oak. He shows up, and he's got this package with him, and she's there with a friend, and he gave her one last chance, and she said no, and he opened fire. And fortunately, his former wife and friend were able to escape, but the gunfire and panic caught the attention of a soldier who just happened to be in the building downstairs, who leaped into action. And when he went up to the room, Tobin had already shot himself to death. His ex got away. He was never going to get her back. He even failed in trying to kill her. So I guess he just decided to check out. And he had brought in a box of dynamite with him because he had been involved in like mine work and stuff. So he knew how to get to dynamite. And he had lit this fuse on this box of dynamite that, had that box gone off, it would have leveled that building. And that was a popular building. There was a lot of people there. A lot of people lived there. Probably a lot of people would have died. But fortunately, that soldier got there in time and saw the package and saw that there was a fuse being lit. And if he didn't stomp that out real quick, he and a lot of other people were not going to survive the day. So, hero. And then I see a grave here, and I'm like, is this his? It looks like it says, like, Proda. Anyway. Okay, this is... I would do this to myself. Am I in section 35 yet? because I was all confused. I was like, oh, I have something to do in section 35. But then I looked at my map I made for myself, and there's nothing marked there. That's because this last individual I forgot to mark. So I have no idea where this guy is buried. Snuffin, that's a great last name. And I'm looking for a guy named Frank Dunn. I know in articles I read about this guy, he was referenced as Frank Fritz, but it says Fritz, I guess, is in like parentheses, like, I don't know, maybe that was a name he kind of used or whatever. It just seems like Frank Dunn was his actual name. Or maybe Frank Dunn was the name that he went by when it was really Frank Fritz. I don't know. I didn't know the guy. So fortunately for me, I don't have to search too hard because this guy is also in an unmarked grave. It's about 6 rows over. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4 lots. So, I mean, he may be buried like right here. It's in this area. And this area is pretty full. There's a spot over there. There's a couple spots over here. Like, it's just known that he was generally in this area that I'm standing in right now. It's where Frank Dunn. Oh, and there's even more spots here. Hard to say for absolute certainty, but this general area. Frank Dunn was killed in 1905. He was outside of a place along, I think it was on Davis Street, just off of Union, just on the east side of the river. And while he was out there, this crazed guy opened fire on him and killed him right by that building. And it was said there was a whole bunch of kids outside, like playing in the streets and stuff. All these kids were running around, and this guy still just, without a second thought, just opened fire. And fortunately, nobody else was injured except for Frank Dunn, who was shot dead on sight and resides in this area today. So Frank Dunn, or Fritz, I mean, it says Dunn. I'm just going to go with Frank Dunn, who is resting eternally over there after being ambushed by this guy. I'm right over the ridge. He's over in section 36. I'm now back in section 39. And here's the eternal resting place of Henry Loomis and his wife. And who is Henry Loomis? Well, Henry Loomis is the guy that shot Frank Dunn to death. This is the guy that did it because he had come under some poor health, and he asked his buddy to, watch over his wife while he was in the hospital, and seemed to him that he was maybe watching her a little too well, and he lost his mind and was fully convinced they were having an affair, and so he ambushed his old friend, gunned him down, and then went a few blocks north to go home, where his wife had just arrived. He walked in, gunned her down, and then killed himself. And like a lot of these unhinged dudes do, ones that maybe were married to the victim or were obsessed with the victim or had been broken up with the victim, he made sure after he killed her and then killed himself, he made sure that when he died, he was like embracing her so that, they would find them that way. Because, yeah, you loved your wife so much. You loved her so much that you killed her. What a dick. So anyway, that's where the killer and his wife reside together. I mean, it almost seems wrong that they're even like buried together. They should have found her a better place. Somewhere, just somewhere way off in that direction. All right, I'm cutting between section 39 and 38 so I can get over to section 31 on the other side of the pathway over here. And this is another one I'm really excited about. This is a gravesite I've wanted to visit for quite some time, even though the victim in question is buried in an unmarked grave. Which is it's kind of interesting. I mean, this was kind of a forgotten person by the time of their death, but they still had a decent amount of money. But yeah, I know it's in this section right here because it's right next to this this gravestone marked by the name Duncan. But right here is the final resting place of a woman by the name of Elizabeth. Well, her birth name. She got married a few times, changed her name a few times, but Elizabeth Young, who's more well known historically as Liverpool Liz, who at a time where women couldn't even serve alcohol in saloons, she ran her own place. She ran the Senate Saloon at 2nd and Davis, and that's what she is most remembered for. In an area full of saloons, she was just of extreme prominence historically because of that. I think she was just another one in the area. I'm sure, some people were like, why is there a lady running a saloon? Ain't right. But she was as far as saloon people in the north end of Portland go, because they were all mixed up in some type of criminal enterprise here or there, pretty much all of them, Liverpool Liz included, had a prostitution thing going on connected to their establishment. A lot of these places, they had the women that were working as like waitresses or passing drinks around for the guys. They doubled as sex workers upstairs. But one gimmick that a lot of these places did was when these guys got drunk enough and needed to go upstairs, another job that a lot of these women had was that they would, pick their pockets clean. If they had some money on them, they'd snatch the money. Well, at least Liverpool Liz, now maybe there were times when money was taken, she had a special area in her saloon that if a guy was wasted, she would make sure to take his wallet and his pocket watch, whatever, important belongings, and she had a place to stash those to keep them for, that individual when they came around. So, there's some respect there. But yeah, she's just really, and she mostly gained her prominence through articles written by historian Stuart Holbrook in the 1930s, who he was known to kind of exaggerate things, but in talking to people way back then who were part of that culture that Liverpool Liz was living in, we actually, that it's been helpful in us understanding, at least having a general idea of who she was and what she was like. And I think still to this day, there has never been a picture found of her. There's like artist renderings of her. And I know even in one of the articles I found posted during the 30s, during that Stuart Holbrook era, somebody actually posted something in or like with the article that said like, hey, if anybody has like an old picture of her, send it to us. And I don't think that ever successfully happened. But yeah, here we are, the final resting place of the one and only Liverpool Liz. And from the vicinity of where Liverpool Liz is buried, a brief reprieve from all the tragedies I've been discussing. I just kind of organized this based on where people are, so I'm just having a lot of tragedies near the end, and here I'm about to bring you another one. Here's somebody else that I didn't know only until the last year or so is buried here. Oh, hello. Hello. Wait, I'm looking for the grave of Clara Fitch, or Claire Adelaide Fitch I guess that was her biological name, but she was known to go by the name Clara. I've been having a nightmare of a time finding this. It looks just like this. Wait, we got one buried here. Is this a long one? Gustafson. Well, that doesn't help me out, because it should be right in this area that I'm in. And it's a long stone, and it's in section 38. There's always one. Yeah, it should be. I should be literally pretty much standing on it right now. So I don't know, maybe it's just mismarked. I don't know, maybe I wrote something down wrong. I don't know, just took an interest. Because I'm not finding it, so I don't think I'm gonna find the Fitches. I'm literally walking to areas where it shouldn't be. Just because I see ones like this, and this is what theirs looks like. Anyway, probably won't find it, but she's supposed to be buried in this section. Claire Adelaide Fitch being her, I guess, her actual name. And she was killed in, God, I did a whole video on this and I'm already forgetting details. I think it was 1899. She was found brutally murdered in Cycle Park, which was located just east of where Lloyd Center is today, just for reference. And her boyfriend at the time was apprehended, and it was one of those things where they'd seen each other that night. There was no indication there was problems, but he was the last person known seen with her. He was quickly apprehended, quickly taken to trial, and convicted on that case. And I just try to, be objective in my video, but I pose the arguments that maybe he didn't do it. He absolutely could have done it. He unfortunately didn't have a reliable alibi, and but there was reasons why one might think he was innocent, but it's one of those things that's never been entirely solved. I don't even know why I'm looking back here. Am I even still in section? I'm barely in section 38 still. So she's buried here. Her family is there somewhere in here. Guarantee someone's going to see this video, come out here, and in like 30 seconds they're going to find where the gravestone is. But I've cycled back and forth twice, and my foot is sore, and I'm done. So I tried. So I reckon, is this section? Yeah, this section right across the sidewalk. This is section 36 right here. And right here is the grave of Ferdinand H. Drews, born 1845, died 1903. His wife, who lived until 1945. They were born just a couple years apart, so you might wonder why she lived so much longer than Ferdinand. Well, and that's a very interesting story that I'm actually planning on doing a video about. I wonder if anybody, because I know that they had a lot of children. Are there more of them here? I don't see any. Anyway, so Ferdinand Drews had a daughter named Pauline, who married a guy named Martin Van Buren Leasia. Martin Leasia, like a lot of Portland husbands, turn of the century. This is 1901, 1902, 1903. Kind of a deadbeat, possessive, drunk, abusive. And Pauline wanted out and got a divorce. And Martin was so unhinged that he actually tried shooting a woman on her houseboat that was a witness for Pauline in the divorce proceedings. Another guy who was a miserable piece of garbage husband, but then the moment his wife left, he, did everything he could to get her back. And most of these guys, they weren't doing it because they really loved their wives. They were doing it because they wanted their way. They were doing it because, during those times, if you were a man who couldn't keep your wife, you were less than nobody. This was all male ego stuff. So Pauline went to live with her father in North Portland. It would be the Arbor Lodge neighborhood today. And Martin showed up, and Ferdinand was like, you're not welcome here. And Martin pulled a gun and gunned down Ferdinand Drews, his former father-in-law, in cold blood. And that's just the start of that story, because he then went in, abducted his former wife, and they went on this, you know, they were on the run, her unwilling, but they were on the run for a few days, and he threatened to kill their children and kept threatening her life the whole time. He was an unhinged lunatic. And after a couple days, they were finally found by the police, and she was saved from the clutches of her demented ex-husband. And yeah, this is the resting place of Pauline's father, who was just trying to protect his sister, just trying to protect his daughter from her lunatic ex-husband. And not far from Ferdinand Drews's resting place, right over here, there's the grave I'm looking for a man named Rudy Kallio, if I'm pronouncing that last name right. I do not know, and he shouldn't be that far away. Another one I had to look up again, because they are actually unmarked, and it said that they're buried next to the Rasmussen family, and the picture I saw of it showing where they were buried, this grave is in the foreground and that grave is in the background. So they're buried, I mean, since they're considered next to the Rasmussens, I'm guessing, it says him and his wife are buried, so I'm guessing it's right, you know, from that grave to maybe this point, somewhere right in here is where they are buried. So I'm glad I looked back. I just assumed this guy would have a gravestone. And as I fiddle with my papers, so this is the resting place of a guy named Rudy Kallio. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing the last name right, and his wife. And this is just, you know, a little interesting thing I found. Rudy Kallio was a Major League Baseball player from 1918 to 1925. He originally played for the Detroit Tigers and later the Boston Red Sox. And after retiring from Major League Baseball, he actually worked with the Portland Beavers, the former local baseball team that we had here. And this is where he and his wife rest today. All of a sudden, I started noticing there's just a bunch of people wandering through the cemetery, and I'm like, they're all really young. And I realized it's Central Catholic High School's right across the street, and it's about time for school to be out. I'm sorry, this guy's last name is Snuffin. That's the best. Why couldn't I have a name like that? So anyway, that is my stop here at Lone Fir Cemetery, visiting a succession of different sites. And unlike previous ventures where I've not found a lot of graves, I'm a little bit more skilled at finding graves and not going out with a kind of half-assed map and then wondering why I can't figure out where I'm going. It's a bummer that it seems like the grave of Maud McCroskey and her other family members, seems like they're still just buried under there somewhere, because that's the second time I've tried to find them. Anyway, there's a lot of different names I found. I'm sure there'll probably be more that I found, but I want to kind of do this at other cemeteries. I really enjoyed cycling through all of these different names and just find a lot of these people I found just because I was just cycling through the listing of all the people that are buried here. And I'm sure I could find the resting place of a lot of people that I've heard of or find interesting or have covered in videos before, and do that in other cemeteries like I did here, or at least that's a future plan. And this video bought me more time working on another project that there was no way I was going to have it done this week, and my foot's been bothering me, so I haven't gone out that much. And it was still nice. The rains are coming, but yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed that. And yeah, as always, you can like, share, subscribe. You want to help my channel out, the link to my Patreon is in the description with this video. And yeah, all that said, thanks for stopping by, and until next time, this has been Steve the Historian. I'm just walking along the eastern wall. So cool, the streetcar tracks are still here. So you can see where the, like I said earlier, the streetcar line used to go through here. And they're still here now, which is so cool. See, they just come right out of this. Now they're just cutting out of somebody's home. But yeah, and so you can see, and they used to go right through here. So a little just off to the side of Morrison today.